one thing is that I think I just want to make a comment, not to this right now, because I don't really fancy these birds so much. It's a beautiful bird. But Ken raised a good question about publishing bad experience or experiments that didn't work out well. Some years ago, way back actually, we had an international telemetry conference where I was organizing it together with others, and we had one session that experiment that went wrong. And we tried really to get papers into that. We managed to have two. People were really reluctant to show their data because they were wrong. I think it was Finn Ögland who killed all his carp in Africa because it was too cold. And then it was me who killed all the very, very threatened spring salmon in one river by tagging them too early, and they just all croaked. But we published these papers, and they've been cited quite a lot. So I think it's very important that you guys do it. I know that we are all afraid that, oh no, if our tagging leads to mortality, we don't want to show it because then we get problems with animal welfare and so on. But in a way, we just need to address these things, and we know there's a bias. Anyway, I'll get right on to my cormorant stock. So, migrating smolts is what we are talking about here. It's also other fish species, but I was trying to keep my focus on salmon. We have been working with a whole bunch of other fish, and of course, sea trout has been an integrated part of all our work throughout the years. But I'll try to see if I can sort that out a little bit here. So mainly I have three main stories. One is the whole cormorant conflict, not just in Denmark, but the whole one. Then I will tell you a little intriguing story about the Danish salmon. I could easily spend hours on that, but I'll try to get it down to half of my presentation. Then, of course, the results of 18 years of these small predation studies. And then I want to talk about change of behavior of the predators, which I think it's a crucial thing to consider when you make these type of studies and conclude on it. And if I get time, I'll talk a little bit about management. And I got time enough because there's the lunch break, so we don't have to worry about that. So the fact that cormorant is a conflict species is not surprising to anybody, and I don't have to try to persuade you of that. It's kind of going on everywhere. Here's an old homepage I saw actually from the Angling Trust here, where you have to report cormorants, and you see in Germany they have a Cormorant und Fischbestand, eine unendliche Geschichte, so that's a never-ending story, and it really is a never-ending story. This was from 9, and it's still going on, and it's a high-profile conflict in Germany, and it's a high-profile conflict in Finland nowadays, and in Sweden, and in Denmark too. So it's on the political agenda over and over again. I've been summoned to the Finnish Parliament twice last year to come and talk to them about the cormorant predation issue, because they need to do something about it. And in US, like we were talking about the double-crested cormorants, I was involved in this here too. In Columbia River, there's an artificial sandbar where we have a lot of cormorants, and lo and behold, the pit tagging showed that some of the cormorants ate 3.6% of the juvenile steelhead smolts. So that was terrible, because 3.6% is not much, but that's 20 million juveniles. So they say we got to do something, and they actually went in with the army. And I was consulted by the army to tell them how can we deal with this, and they went in at night with a silencer and a .22 caliber, and they shot the whole bunch of them. And I don't know if it helped a lot, but boy, they got a lot of public hearing replies that I looked through, and that was fantastic. You know, those bird people were way up there and getting so angry about this. The thing is, those cormorants were never there before. They just came because of this sandbar. So again, it's not an invasive species, but in a way they act like they are, and that's kind of typical for this story. Okay. So what is it? It's a conflict, and it's people always say it's a conflict between people. Yeah, sure it is, but here's a conservation of healthy cormorant population. We all want, well, not all, but most of us want cormorants. We think they're great. I was always happy when I was younger to see cormorants on the coast. I thought it was a great bird to watch. But, you know, healthy cormorant population, but we also need to have healthy fish stocks. And when we say healthy fish stocks, we don't need 2 or 3 salmon in each river. We would like to have harvestable fish stocks. So we should have fish enough for predators and anglers. I do this talk for commercial fishermen too. I did many years back in the 90s, but now all the commercial fishermen in Denmark have gone bankrupt, so because there's no fish to catch on the coast, so they basically lost out. So I don't even put fishermen here anymore. Now it's only anglers who are concerned about the fish. So let's see. There we have it. This is not very up to date, but you know, this is the situation. Here's the little country of Denmark. Here's Djursland that I've been talking about, that some of you didn't know, which surprised me a lot, but this is actually where we live. these are the bloody colonies. They're pretty much everywhere. We have about 250,000 birds in the high season. That means August, September. And in the winter time, in spring, the minimum number is about down to 15,000. So as you can see, well, most of you know how small Denmark is, so it's quite a dense population of cormorants there. A lot of birds that need a lot of fish. So what has the development been? Well, just like everywhere else, they got protected here in 1980. We had very few pairs. Then it really took off in the early 90s, and then we leveled off at about 40,000 pairs. And then we had a decrease here due to reasons I'll come into, but basically food and cold weather, food depletion, and then now we have a little bit more again. So in total numbers, it doesn't look like it's so bad, and all the conservationists say, yeah, look, it's leveled out and it's going down, so now you have no conflicts anymore. But of course, that's not the case. We have much more conflict now than ever. So the story brief here was that we got them here. The cormorants raised up in the 90s, and traditional pound net fishing totally disappeared. As I said, when I started working with this, we had 800 commercial pound net fishermen. Now we got 4 left, maybe 7. It depends on what you talk about, full-time or part-time. Then all the coastal fish and fishing was heavily reduced. We just didn't see the fish along the coast anymore. Eel pout disappeared first, then all flounders caught and so on. So now it's basically empty out there. At that time we had relatively few but very large colonies of cormorants. They started to collapse then. Chick died, they were starved out, and now we have much more but much smaller colonies. We got more birds coming in the winter. Before we didn't have overwintering bird much, but now we got lots from Sweden and Finland because they breed tons and tons of birds, and maybe also because the winters tend to get milder, as you know. But in 2009-10 we had these cold, harsh winters, 2 of them, and there we suddenly saw a change of behavior. These birds started to go inland and be less shy, and that's where all our problems as anglers started, at least. So in the recent years we have much more problems with rivers, brooks and lakes, and the situation now is that both grayling, resident trout and North Sea houting are in dire strait. They are really threatened by extinction because of cormorant predation. So, and there's quite a consensus about these things. Okay, so now I get directly to the smolts. Well, when we talk smolts, we have salmon smolts, we have trout smolts. We can also have wild smolts and hatchery smolts. We did studies on all these 4 groups. And the predation we see can be pre-smolt or par in-river predation. That hasn't been a big issue before. This is what we're studying now because that suddenly became a big question. Then we have this predation on migrating smolt, which we have been studying since 1995, I think, with both radio tags and acoustic tags. So we started our acoustic studies with V. Severns and so on all way back in 2001. Then we have, of course, predation on post-smolts, so that's, again, when you come out on the coast. So, but one question you always have, I guess, is do they really have any wild salmon in Denmark? We are not even part of NASCO or anything. Why does this stupid guy talk about salmon? It's probably just something they stuck in there. Actually, I put a photo of a hatchery salmon smolt here and a wild salmon smolt there just for fun. That was from Norway, but I just thought it was interesting that they think that when you tag these guys, they should represent these guys. But, so I'm always in favor of looking at wild fish. We don't really want to mess too much with the hatchery fish. But, so the story of Denmark is, yes, we do have salmon. This was from a day a few years ago in Vardø River, and you see these guys are pretty happy with the wild fish they got there. There were 2 18+ kilos caught in April. So how did that happen that we suddenly have the salmon in Denmark? Well, we actually removed barriers. That's basically what we did. I can call it river restoration. Yes, we did put out gravel somewhere for fun, and it does help to give new spawning areas, but this one is the one that really did the job for us. And of course, there was also a stop for coastal fishing. So our salmon population in Denmark have increased 100-fold over the last 20 years. So from having hardly any salmon, we ended up having a lot. This was what we saw in Denmark in general. We used to have a very nice salmon river here in Skjern. We got data back from 100 years ago. They caught these are the registered caught fish in the estuary. So it's not a lot, you see 600 fish, but you see also in the 80s it went down. And since then, we actually thought that salmon in Denmark is a history thing. They're just extinct, and we were thinking there were about 50 individuals coming back every year in the whole country to spawn, and whether they were original or not was not something people were thinking too much about. So in the early 90s and up to 2000, lots of fish were imported from Borishool, Korip, Kong, Ætran, Lagan, wherever, and put out to see if we could do some restoration of the salmon stocks. And of course these fish did survive and come back, but they didn't do very well. So that was not a very good story. But then we were lucky to have a box in the basement of the Institute where we had some old scales, 100-year-old scales from a bunch of these West Jutland rivers. They were from 1896 to 1916, I think, those scales. And our geneticist managed to get viable DNA out of those, so he could make a baseline and say, here's the DNA baseline for a Danish West Coast salmon. And we even saw there was difference between these rivers. Well, so what we did then was went into those rivers and caught very few, those 5-10 salmon we could find every year. And lo and behold, there was still the original genetic composition, and there was even a nice variation in them. So we thought, okay, we kick out all these foreign stockings and only base whatever we are going to stock on our own. We didn't really want to stock anything, but we had to do something. So the situation now in 1999, when we started this work, was that the salmon was extinct here, extinct there, and there, but we still had stocks of original West Jutland salmon coming back to these 4 rivers. So these 4 rivers are like the backbone in our work, and those are also the ones covered by our management plan. Okay, so what happened then? Well, you see, we started to put out original fish here. The way we did that, of course, is you go through a river, electrofish, take each and every fish up. The ones that are clearly like escaped hatchery fish or something you just throw out. But there are others, we did a genetic test on each individual, and only the ones that had the right genetic composition was put into the breeding stock. So it took speed here, and at the same time we started removing all the dams. Hydropower stations went, all the fish farms went, most of everything else also went out. So the rivers were mainly getting their connectivity back. And this is what happened. Here's just a catch. So now we're actually up on an annual run size of 14,000 fish. The anglers catch about 40% of them, but keep only 10, so you can see there's quite a lot of catch and release going on. There's a very high proportion of multi-sea winter fish in our stocks. So on average, this is based on 5,600 salmon in my database randomly caught by electrofishing in the autumn. The mean size is 78 centimeters. So they're really nice big fish. We don't get many grills, and most of them are wild. We still have some fish coming back that are fin clipped from the hatchery, but we release less and less fish. 2 of the rivers are now stopped any stocking at all because they all work. It all works fine. So that's the story of the Danish salmon. Just a little note from this year, there was a guy up in Holstebro. He got a 1 meter and 41 centimeter salmon here in October last year. He did put it out again, as you see, but he was quite surprised to get that. He was actually standing on a parking lot just casting out a spinner, and then he got that. And this must be one of the longest fish caught in Europe that year. So we are quite happy with the angling, and it brings in a lot of money. Okay, so why do they actually fare so well? Well, we don't have salmon lice because we don't have salmon farming. We don't have dams anymore. We have lots of renewable energy in Denmark. You know, we cover about 70 to 80% of our power from renewable energy, but it's all windmills, so we don't really use hydropower at all. We don't have harvest on the coast or in estuaries at all anymore. There's a little bycatch with something, but it's very little. And we are lucky to not have these parasites. We don't seem to have much atrazine, and because our farmers cannot use that, at least. They use all kind of other shit, but we don't know about that. And then, of course, the most important is that Kim and I are making a good management and honest and so on. So that's down to us. But I was so humbled to put that last. But one thing we do have, of course, is predation. Because now we have this is the little paradise. You know, everybody else would dream of this. They would think, boy, we have no dams and you have all that. You know, Martin has been over there looking at our rivers. They look like shit, actually. They're quite boring, you know, like on a field, it's just a canal. But, you know, we don't have the dams, so fish are doing really well, very productive. But what about the predation? Yeah, this is the snake in the paradise. Here's actually a little photo of our hero here. He has a nice time here at a sea trout river outlet, and he just, you know, it's not a big flock of birds or anything, but he's just happily eating those smolts as they come out. So this is how it looks when you have a nice little cormorant there. And, you know, that's kind of cute, I think, and not so bad. But of course, if you get more of them, it gets more problematic. So what did we do in the old days? We had old studies. I didn't want to study cormorants. Nobody wanted. We are fish people. We want to study fish, you know. But every time we tag fish, because we were much into telemetry already in the 90s, we ended up finding our tags in the cormorant colonies. So we were like, we got to do something with it. So we wanted to try to actually quantify this very, very, very fine out here. So I tagged eels, salmon smolts, flounders, and also trout smolts actually were tagged and released in Scan River. We use CV tags to try to use another method because again, if you want to quantify these things, you need to combine a whole bunch of methods. It's not enough just to tag them with one thing and then go out, I think. So this is what we tried back then. We got very nice results of that. I had a very good student. He was out there collecting pellets every second day. He managed to get like 6,000 pellets. And out of those, we took subsamples every day and looked for otoliths too. And of course, scanned all the pellets were scanned for the CV tags. So these coded wire tags could be found in those. And that will give us graphs like this. This is 2003. This is based on what we find in the pellets. First collection was 15th of April. So this is April, May, and June comes here. So this is what you see. That's the daily estimated number of smolts eaten per day from these pellets. So that's kind of neat. That shows very well this dome-shaped smolt out migration. And this was just collected in that one colony in the estuary. So the results from that estuary from the 4 years there was that we did telemetry in 2001 and 2002, and we found 40 to 50% of the tags were actually found in that one colony. The way to do that is that you have a data logger in the lower river, so you see what comes out of the river. So the ones that does not come out of the river but ends out in the colony, you know they've been eating in the river, and the ones that pass the data logger and end in the colony have been eaten in the estuary. So that's pretty easy. And then basically you have a data logger on the colony with I have 2 this year, and we just equip them with solar panels, so they are just out there doing their job. I have a photo of one that I didn't bring, but where cormorants have been shitting so much on it, it's all white, so they're probably trying to ruin our equipment, but it didn't work. But that was the results from that. From coded wire tagging, we did that in 2 other years. We found that 25% of the available tag smolts were eaten during the 3-week period. 40 to 50% of all the 10,000 tagged eels were eaten in this first season, and all of the flounders were eaten in just 2 weeks. So you must imagine that is just in a huge, large 300 square kilometer estuary that they were actually eating all the flounders so fast. And then we have the pellet analysis, just looking at otoliths, just totally traditional, old-fashioned biology. Time-consuming, but can learn something about it. We found that 30,000 salmon smolts were eating 1.4 million flounders and 38,000 eels in that same year. So that makes up fine with what should be produced in this whole estuary and what used to be the basis of a fishery. Nowadays, there's absolutely no fishery there at all, but they used to catch about 1,200 tons of flounder in that estuary per year. Very proliferate fishing. But they don't have that anymore. Well, there's other predators. I just wanted to throw this in somewhere. This is from a study we did in Norway. I was tired of tagging fish, and Finn Økland was drinking cognac and playing his, what the hell, harmonica or whatever it is. Yeah, so I went down to the coast and thought I would try to cast out my bait to catch some saithe and cod because I knew they were down there. And I was sitting right there on the edge where that sandbar is coming out. I was thinking so much about it when you talked about River Bush because they have to cross this very shallow sandbar, the salmon smolts, and then go down in the deep. And I was there, and right as in the middle of the night, like when you turn a switch on, you heard these gulls going, and then I was looking, and the water was clear. And you know, even it was midnight, there was still sun up, at least some light up there, and I could see these smolts come out in schools. We had the big fat hatchery smolts, small wild salmon smolts, and big trout smolts, all coming together in one school, out through the area. And immediately when they came out, the whole thing got started, and I caught 79 saithe and cod on my gear just one night. And then I looked in the bellies of them, and lo and behold, they were all filled with smolts. So if you're unlucky to have these kind of predators there, they would also hammer everything. We even found some of our Vemco tags in the cod that we have been tagging the day before in one of the predators. So these things are also present. We don't have them much in Denmark these days. As I said, it seems that the cormorants and the seals cleaned up the coast very well for these type of predators. But so I don't think that's a big issue for us, but it could be other places. Okay, then we went back to scan, last year actually. Now we have fewer birds than 10 years ago, and we had this program now of harassing and shooting the birds out there, keeping them off the river. We have decided we don't want any cormorants principally in our rivers at all. So you can always get permission to shoot and harass them. So now we wanted to see if the fewer birds and the harassing have helped to reduce the predation. So we did radio telemetry out there last year. I had 74 salmon tagged. I had 75 tags, but one of them didn't work, just like Martin says. We lost 8 in the river. Some of them end up like this. But the remaining, we found in 17 of those in the cormorant colonies. Problem here was that we had several colonies that year. It was supposed to be in their one goddamn colony, but these birds spread out, so they were in 3 different places. And I only had the data logger in 1, so therefore my estimate is not as clear as it used to be. But this was the level we ended up with. 23 to 42% of the tags were taken by cormorants. Then we also did acoustic telemetry. Here's the Scan River, small trap up here, another little small trap here, fish are tagged, coming down, hydrophones just like you've seen, and then I have hydrophones out at the coast here too at the sluice. So this is the estuary, Scan River comes in here, here's the one spot that's probably dangerous, and here's the other spot. So we were looking, and you see we have much less nest out here now. We only have 500-600 when we had 2,000 before. So fewer birds in the estuary. And then so we tagged these 104 salmon smolts with acoustic tags, and we had netto of 38% survival. So that's very high mortality through this still. Wild smolt seem to have a higher survival than hatchery in this particular study, but that's not a pattern we can recognize. So my whole, this presentation actually could be summarized in this one table here, because these are the studies we did. You can see I tried to write them up chronological here. We have used trout, hatchery, wild salmon, everything. The numbers tagged, the methods here, and we even have published quite a bit of this. So I took all these 20-some studies and added them up, and we got an average smolt loss of 48%. Throughout the lower river and estuary migration. And these are mostly done in the west coast systems, but we have some of the data also from the east coast. So for us it seems to be a very, very standard pattern that we lose over the years so many. You can see there is a range, but it's still very high, and of course it's not satisfactory that we lose so many of our precious fish right there to the predation. So where are they really vulnerable? Well, we know that because it's always when they transit from lotic to lentic waters, when they come from a river into a reservoir, into a dam, into just an impoundment, everywhere that the river slows down, the smolts start to become, they just become stupid. I mean, they mill around and they are on the surface, and everything that can eat something can eat them. I even seen foxes eating, coming down and taking some smolts. So those are very dangerous places. Estuaries are dangerous, coasts are dangerous. And all these obstacles are extremely dangerous. We found 70% smolt loss at some stupid dams that were not even used for anything. I mean, all the water would come out. The only thing that happened was the smolts came in, and they found that, oh, there's no current here. What do I do? Then they start milling around, and then they got eaten. And there was no reason they should be lost, but they did. So all these little things are even just bridges. And there was also a guy talking about a culvert the other day and how just the shadow stops the fish. And my PhD from '99 was actually on all this, the way that the pike were adapting to the smolts and going up in the river and actually sitting right there in front of the bridge where the smolt will stop, and then they will just eat them. So the freer the river is, the better it is as far as we see it. So now I'll change to this whole change of behavior that the cormorants started to get into our rivers. And that is a new phenomenon. We didn't have that before. Here's from that salmon river where that fish on 1.41 meters was caught. And one of my friends were down there one morning, and you can see these birds just keep coming up, and they all got fish in their mouth. And the only fish you have here is salmon and trout. So you can imagine how that river looks afterwards. This is not a normal sight to see because the birds are leaving as soon as you get there, but we have seen quite a few of these events. And I'm not too happy to show it right here, right before lunch, but I guess it's okay. I took some of the worst pictures away that we have. So why do the birds suddenly start to go up in the rivers? We know they did that in Germany. Central Europe have been complaining. They lose their fish. They lose all the grayling and stationary trout and so on in their rivers in Switzerland, Czech Republic, Austria, Germany. We never had that happen because our birds were nicely staying out in the coast where they should. But of course now the coast were basically empty from fish. Plus we had these 2 cold winters. All the fjords froze over, the lakes froze over. So these few 15,000 or so birds that stayed in Denmark in the winter, they had to have some food. And they came into the Put-and-Take lakes, they came up to the rivers, they came everywhere. And we were hoping that when we get a mild winter, that they will return to their old behavior. But of course not. They kept going into the rivers all the time. And that's of course a problem. So one good sign of this, an indication of this, is grayling. Here's actually that year where it happened. This is the cold winter here. This is a standard place to monitor grayling. So we have 2 kilometers of river that's been electrophished exactly the same time, same people, same way. And here you see what we normally will get, 412 fish, and in 2010, 6. So it's basically an extinction of fish there. I was looking at grayling too, because that's a fish that is just disappearing now for our rivers, and we had lots of fly fishermen that like to catch a grayling. They have been totally protected now for 6 years. And of course it doesn't help because it's not fishermen that do anything to them at all. Nobody takes home a grayling, they catch them and release them. But this is what happened. They all get pretty much hammered by cormorants. Here's an old study from Gudenåen where we have data way back from. Right here was when the fish otter started coming, so we had a decrease in population, but still a very nice population. These are juveniles and the upper ones are a larger grayling. And then the cormorants start coming in there, and you see, since then we have had hardly any any grayling at all here. And it's exactly the same picture with brown trout. I had a student doing a little study here that was a very illustrative study because he was looking at only 25 grayling. That was really hard for us to find that many in that river. So we had a 7-kilometer stretch, totally unregulated, fantastic, natural, nice river. Nobody's fishing there. And we tagged these 25 in October, and they were doing great until they came to February where it was cold, and then we had cameras up there. So we saw 2 or 3 or 4, up to 6 cormorants being there for just a week. And after that, 80% of these fish were eaten, and 75% of the whole fish biomass of the river, because we did actually go through it. And when you look at the energetics and see how much do they eat per day, this 0.5 kilo, and we had 7 kilometers of river with very few fish, it all added up very nicely in the end. And we are publishing this here now because this is quite scary. And the most scary part is that the local people who live on the river, the fishing club and so on, says it cannot be cormorants here because we don't have them. That's why we looked in this river, because we thought it's got to be something else here. This is the one place where we don't have cormorants in Denmark. And we had very few, but it was enough to actually make such a mess there. So what we are looking on to, this is the salmon spawning run in the River Skjern, the main river. And you see how well it went all the time, and we were expecting it to go at least up to 10,000, and then suddenly, and this is probably an effect of in-river predation. That means that on top of eating those 50% of the smolt that we know they eat every year, and that the salmon obviously could handle, they also start now to feed on the hatchery rearing areas, and we saw that they are really more empty now. There's much less salmon fry to be found in the river. Despite good spawning runs, we get less and less, and this is attributed definitely to predation. So the conclusion is that we have a significant impact on fish populations in both rivers, lakes, and on the coast. And that predation is basically accepted to be the main regulating factors for many of our fish stocks. So we don't talk pollution anymore, we don't talk dams, connectivity, we don't talk fishing, we don't talk agriculture so much, we really talk about this predation. And the effects is of course economic loss and cultural loss, because a lot of all these coastal fishing villages and so on are just not there anymore. The biodiversity loss is critical. We have fish that are this North Sea houting that are indigenous to that one river is going extinct now because of the cormorants. And of course we had problems in reaching the requirements, because we have a Water Framework Directive requirement on fish saying 80 juvenile fry, 80 fry from salmon or trout per 100 square meters. And we can't reach that if nothing comes up to spawn. So is this only a problem in Denmark? And if so, why? I mean, we have a huge, we have a high density, but for example, in Sweden, in southern Sweden, they have the exactly same density. In Finland, they have the same density. In Germany, it's different because they don't have many breeding pairs. There's a winter thing there. And we know there's problems there, but and I know, I mean, for River Bush, we saw that there was indications that it could be a big problem, but I'm still not convinced that it's as bad your places, because you would have seen it, I'm sure, especially after doing small studies. But I was amazed to see and quite surprised to see the amount of studies starting up here now with acoustic telemetry. And so bear this in mind and make sure that you look at the cormorants, even if they're not really there. They might play a role in this. So you probably ask about management. I can just tell you very briefly that we have this group that's been working for 20 years. We have a national cormorant management plan since '97. The measures are basically egg spraying of the eggs. If you spray them with paraffin oil, they die, nothing comes out of them. The stupid birds keep just nesting on them the whole year and they don't get anything out of it. We can prevent new settlements, we do that, but it's kind of hard because if you deter them from going one place, they just go another. Then it's the shooting. It's not really hunting, but it's protective shooting that is initiated more and more. So those are the principal measures we have used. We try to make the management adaptive so that it changes. You have a framework here, but for example, when we saw the loss in pound nets, fishermen were permitted to shoot cormorants around their nets within a kilometer. So that was actually a really nice measure when we still had 800 fishermen. Now that we only have a handful and they're so old they can't hit anything, they're also drunk most of the time. There's one guy who shoots about 1,000 a year and he's doing fine, but the rest can't shoot shit. So this is not a good measure anymore. Then we lost smolts, and this is all interesting in the way of how does management work, at least in our country. Because we sit there by the table and everybody says, oh, no, the cormorants are natural, we don't do anything. Then I document this. It's scientific documentation. We publish it in a report or internationally, and we throw this report and bang, then we can do this, you know. And then next time we document, well, we lost smolts. They say, okay, then we are all happy with letting the anglers shoot cormorants in the smolt period. So everybody can get permission to do that now. Then we found out they started foraging the river, so now we also have protective shooting in the river in the wintertime, and we even have possibilities to shoot and kill a lot of birds at the night roosting places if they're up by the river. So in that sense, it's been a big success. The management boasts this as this is a good success because we have consensus, we have solved the conflicts. The conflicts are not ending up in a lot of frustration. People are more or less accepting this because all the stakeholders are on board. Problem is, it doesn't really help the fish because they still get eaten out there regardless. Here's some permissions granted to shoot in the rivers, and you see actually 45 clubs have now gained a possibility to go out and organize this. So the angling clubs can give permission to the local hunters, and they can go and shoot all the birds they want. They have to register it, but they can do it. They're not very good at it either. It's obviously quite hard to shoot these buggers in the winter. So I don't know how much that helped. And here's, you see, that's the way you go out in the colonies, oil the eggs, then they look like Easter eggs here, and nothing comes out of them. And this should be great. You saw we didn't want this colony. This is the colony in Ringkøbing Fjord, the big problematic colony that eats all our salmon, Skjern salmon. And you saw, oh, we were spraying half of the eggs, then more than that, then almost all the eggs in many years here. And it went down to, we were quite happy, and then bang, you know, it goes back up again. And now we have actually this many nests again. So we think there's no really effect on this egg oiling because new birds will just come in. As the old dies, new ones come, and they are very mobile. We got lots of birds settling here from Sweden and Norway and Finland too. So it's not the management measures really that seems to influence our numbers of cormorants, not at all. It's basically the cold winters and the lack of food. Because they do die of starvation and they do show signs of not getting food enough because, as I said, the coastal areas are more or less empty from fish. So what we have a situation now, I think, is that we have a bird here, has no conservation issue. There's 1.5 million cormorants in Europe, so there's kind of one of the most abundant birds. We don't have any recreational value, they don't have a commercial value, but they have a lot of feelings associated with it. The other side, we have us, the fishers, and I think we have better arguments now. We have a conservation argument, we have biodiversity, we have recreational, commercial, cultural fishery. Just that fishing in those one river here generates about £2 million a year to the local community. And that's something the politicians seem to understand. So So we are seeing a tendency that our scale is tipping now this way. But the problem is we need to have the other Nordic countries to help us, because we can't deal with this ourselves. Because even if we removed all the colonies in Denmark, we will still get these 20,000 birds from Sweden and Finland in the winter, and they would still come in the rivers, and they could easily empty all our rivers if that's what they really wanted. So that's not so well. Anyway, that was it for today. Thank you.